just wanted to welcome everyone to our December Network Cafe, a fresh catch for New Hampshire seafood supply chain, which is part of our 2024-2025 Network Cafe Series. My name is Katelyn Jennings. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the communications coordinator for the New Hampshire Food Alliance. And I'm going to start things off like we usually do here, because this is about building community and learning together. I'm going to ask for some introductions. So folks who are here today, if you could introduce yourselves in the chat, share your name, where you're calling in from, whether that's your organization or where you are in the state or in the region, as well as your pronouns if you'd like to share those. As we do that, you're welcome to take a look at our agenda, and I'm going to introduce us to you. I'm going to share a little bit about the Food Alliance before we get started for today. So what is the Food Alliance? As I said, I am the communications coordinator, and so I am one of a small but mighty team that make up the New Hampshire Food Alliance, and together we coordinate a network of over 200 organizations, businesses, and communities that are dedicated to growing a thriving, fair, and sustainable local food system here in New Hampshire. We do that by building relationships with one another. We learn from each other, like what the learning we're going to do today. And we collaborate to collaborate on all of our work to reach common goals and respond creatively to challenges and amplify our collective impact. So we do all of that. All those little dots on the map are representing all those different organizations and more that you see up on those slides. Those organizations make up our network here at the New Hampshire Food Alliance. One of the ways we learn and network together is through our Network Cafe Series, which is what you're attending today. On the first Friday of each month, September through April, we bring our network together and we learn about a topic or an issue that our food system is facing right now. These network cafes are designed for everyone. They're inclusive opportunities for learning and growing in our food systems work, and they are a really unique kind of way for us to, again, learn about something new and something really critical that our food system is facing. In our agenda, you'll see what you can expect from us during this time together, as well as what our expectations are of you. If you have any questions about those expectations, please hit me in the chat, or we can talk about that together at another time. So we do all this work at the New Hampshire Food Alliance and much more as a community outreach program of the Sustainability Institute at the University of New Hampshire in Durham. As part of the university, we share its dedication to diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. We believe those 4 tenets are foundational to achieving our core educational mission and embracing the many characteristics of our community members that make them uniquely themselves. With that in mind, we believe it's important, especially during these gatherings, to continually acknowledge the hardships the Indigenous communities in our region have faced, as well as the positive impact they have had in our communities. I will do so with this, with an excerpt from the UNH Land, Water, and Life Acknowledgement. As we all journey on the trail of life, we wish to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples have maintained to Indakina, homeland, which the University of New Hampshire community is honored to steward today. We also acknowledge the hardships they continue to endure after the loss of unceded homelands and champion our responsibility to foster relationships and opportunities that strengthen the well-being of the Indigenous people who carry forward the traditions of their ancestors. Okay, thank you all for joining me in that acknowledgement. I'd love to turn to our topic for today. I'm very excited to be joined by my colleague at the New Hampshire Food Alliance, Katelyn Porter, who is our value chain coordinator, and that does not nearly sum up all the wonderful things that she does and works on, including her very important dedication and her work to the seafood community through a lot of the things that she does, which she'll talk a little bit about. I'm also joined by Denise Hunt, who's the owner of Coastline Seafood, and they're together are going to dive us deep into the local seafood supply chain. So I will pass it over to Katelyn.
Thank you so much, Colleen, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I am thrilled to see so many people from the seafood sector joining us. Admittedly, it's making me a little nervous, but I think it's all going to be good. Again, my name is Katelyn Porter. I'm a value chain coordinator, like Colleen said, at the New Hampshire Food Alliance. And with that, I am decidedly not a qualified expert on the topic of global seafood supply chains. I want to start off by saying that I have, however, had the privilege of working with Andrea Tomlinson, who I just saw log in over the last 3 years as she has launched the New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. So when I began working with the Young Fishermen's Alliance, I realized right away that I was relating so closely to the fishermen and women through my background in farming. And so the more I heard about their struggles and all that the New Hampshire seafood industry is currently up against, it's like I was hearing the story of big ag takeover all over again. And really felt like it was one and the same struggle. And yet, for whatever reason, seafood has remained so siloed from the small but incremental successes that small and mid-scale ag has had over in the country over the last couple of decades, such as the resurgence in numbers of CSAs and farmers markets across the country, massive consumer education campaigns about Know Your Farmer or No Farms, No Food, increased federal grants that support small scale producers and more. So it's become very apparent that this disconnect has been a massive disservice to our seafood industry, and they're falling behind. The more I've learned, the more clear it's become that the New Hampshire seafood industry is in crisis. And I'm hoping that we as a community of seafood as a community of food system advocates here listening in today, and the New Hampshire Food Alliance network at large, can increasingly weave seafood into the local food movement that we're all a part of. So today's Network Cafe featuring seafood supply chains and Coastline Seafood is one step towards doing just that. Raising awareness of the current conditions and seeing how we can all pitch in to this worthy endeavor. We are thrilled to be joined by Denise Hunt, co-founder of Coastline Seafood, and we'll be asking all about her and Coastline Seafood's business model here in just a bit. But as a jumping off point for that conversation, I'm going to attempt to summarize what I've learned over the last couple of years about how the seafood supply chain works. There are some similarities to agriculture that we can relate to, and there are some vast differences. So I think it's important for our network to really be educated about those similarities and differences. So, but like any complex industry, there are endless intricacies. You can spend a lifetime learning the ins and outs of seafood supply chains. So please bear with me as I will be generalizing. But here on the screen, you'll see kind of this generalistic supply chain that we're going to review today. That's very active in New Hampshire. And so, fish tend to be caught out in the ocean by fishermen. They are then typically brought right away to an auction where they are sold to typically a processor. The processor might add value to them or might fillet them, might do a number of things, and then they have to work with a distributor that then sells the end product to eventually a buyer, a wholesale buyer, then making its way to consumer. So this is really all to show that my takeaway here is that most fish are actually a value added product. We tend to look at, raw fish on the shelf in Hannaford's as a raw product. But I'd like to think of it more as like almost bread in the agricultural world. It has been brought, from field, it's gone to the mill, which has made its way to a broadline distributor. It's made its way into a bakery that then goes into a grocery store that then finally gets bought by a consumer. There are so many steps in between from that raw product to getting to consumer that it really is a value added product. And with that, each of these steps has a middleman. And seafood is being owned outright by each of these entities who are specialized to perform one or very few tasks. And therefore, each of them is trying to make a profit off of the top, causing the seafood to have to be marked up each time, making seafood more and more expensive the more middlemen there are. So we're going to break down each of these steps now. So the first one is fishermen. What's working, what's not working? Fishermen who are operating their own vessels and or hiring people to operate their businesses and be deckhands, it is providing local jobs, which is beneficial to our economy. And first and foremost, they provide a small scale, environmentally friendly alternative to global seafood companies. What's not working, though, unfortunately, is a much longer list currently. Young and beginner fishermen hoping to get into the sector are up against massive upfront costs of licensing, catch quotas, and equipment just to get started. This number can, to buy a boat and the equipment and these catch quotas can sometimes be a minimum of $500,000 that we are expecting these young folks to take on in debt just to start a business. Regulations is also working against our fishermen, and this was covered more in depth in last year's December Network Cafe, so I won't spend too much time. Again, we could easily spend several hours talking about regulations and how they are working against our working waterfront. Next is that they are up against such large scale industry. We can sort of think of New Hampshire's typical fisherman or lobsterman as, your average half-acre, organic, diversified, non-mechanized veggie farmer that we all know and love in New Hampshire. I like to think of them as, working up against the same scale as a small scale farmer is to the typical Midwest 1,000-acre mechanized monocrop. That's sort of the comparison that we're trying to draw here. The inconsistency in harvesting of species. So there's obviously so much expertise that I do not have that goes into predicting the whereabouts of certain species, certain times of years. But unlike, carrots or potatoes or kale that are rooted in the ground and don't move, seafood moves. And so therefore, when fishermen go out to ocean, they don't necessarily know what's going to come out any given day, which makes the basis of this whole market needed. It's necessarily a reactive market, and therefore, farmers have the ability to plan with their buyers how many carrot seeds they're buying in January to put in the ground because they know they have an end buyer. Fishermen, it's a different story. And this is especially as exacerbated in a changing climate with warming waters off of our coast. Next is graying of the fleet. This is a pretty straightforward comment, a pretty straightforward thing that we're seeing also in agriculture is people are aging out of the sector without those succession plans in place. And in the seafood industry, it's also a lack of viability for small businesses to thrive that's really keeping people from going into the sector. And lastly, which we'll touch upon in pretty much every step of the way, is that because there are all these middlemen put between the fishermen and the consumer, our fishermen are being squeezed out in the bottom and getting very low prices for their catch. So next we'll dive into the next step along the seafood supply chain. Brokers and auctions is kind of this typical next step. What's working here is that fishermen can offload their entire catch. So it is a one-stop shop concept. They don't necessarily have to, think about all of the middlemen steps. Their fish can be unloaded. And this system is consistently available. There are systems in place for fish species that aren't consumed here. So there are systems in place for what is being caught and landed here to go overseas and for fishermen to be able to sell and make money off of their catch, even if there isn't currently a robust market for the species that they're catching. What's not working, on the other hand, is that seafood in large part is leaving our local economy, which has a multiplier effect, right? When seafood stays here, it's not only benefiting the fishermen, but it's also then making a sale at a local farmer's market or a grocery store that also provides jobs, and then is keeping people in New England fed. It has this multiplier effect. When we're shipping the vast majority of seafood that we're landing here overseas, it takes that economic opportunity away from us. Again, touching upon the price point, is that global fishing companies really keep the price down. And this was hit home with me when we were talking to Denise recently, when she said, you know, there might be a boat that comes in, and a New Hampshire fisherman might drop off, 1,000, 2,000 pounds at an auction, but when these massive large scale companies come and they offload 100,000 pounds, they are then up against essentially a global supply and demand price point. Next is processors and distributors. So fishermen can have their catch processed and distributed without extra coordination. Again, these systems are sort of in place. They get to fish and do what they do best, and then offload their fish, and they just get that price point. But what's not working is that there's currently very little local infrastructure, industry, and workforce to help fishermen process and distribute their catch, which is making it a necessity to sell through these big auctions, which means they're forced into a system where the price they receive is determined by this more global supply and demand. Next step is the retail and food service, and by that we mean, wholesale buyers at large. Working again is that wholesale buyers are able to access very consistent products at prices that they expect through these broadline distributors. Again, there's systems in place, and there's behaviors also that kind of back up those systems. What's not working is pretty much the same exact point, is the fact that buyers want and demand these consistent product types and prices. We can kind of flip that on its head, and it's the thing that's also detrimental to the local seafood supply chain. The product isn't as fresh. Often it's been farmed fish, or it's been frozen for longer periods of time. It's been transported over vast distances, so the nutritional content might not be the same. And product regulations are also for getting into those large chain grocery stores or those broadline distributors are too difficult for the local fishermen to meet, which is also another similarity that we see in small scale agriculture. Lastly, the consumer. So it's made its way through this whole supply chain, and what's working, what's not working. We have seen a growing desire for local food, which can work to our benefit. What's not working is that, by and large, New Englanders are not consuming seafood that are in line with the species that New Hampshire fishermen are harvesting in the same proportions. So this brings us back to this big statistic that we know in New Hampshire and in New England, which is that 90% of New England landed seafood is actually being exported. And the same percentage is being imported in order to feed New Englanders the species of fish that they want to eat. So the flip side is that only 10% of what is being caught and landed is actually consumed in New England. And so if we dive just a little bit deeper there to understand what's going on, what is the disconnect, is that it really is that the typical American diet is one of long supply chains, aka highly processed foods, and generally disconnected from and undereducated about what actually grows well in a given area. When we think of different cultures around the world, it's based around what grows in those soils or what is in those oceans. Therefore, we don't necessarily have a cultural demand for what is actually being caught and landed here. And so the way that I relate it to agriculture is that, these underloved species of fish are essentially like kohlrabi, right? We've come a long way in agriculture. I think kale used to be this way that there's, these massive consumer education campaigns about, what do we do with kale? We don't even know. I kind of feel that way about kohlrabi personally right now. But hopefully, with enough education and enough, um, thinking outside the box, we can provide these kind of slow cultural shifts where people learn what to do with the things that are actually being grown and caught in New England. So that brings me to the main topic of today is the coastline seafood supply chain and what they're doing to change this system. For those of you who don't know the role I play at the Food Alliance, I coordinate the New Hampshire Food Hub Network and have a background in and a passion for food hubs, which are essentially the businesses who work with a region's worth of farmers to help get their product to market, whether it be through aggregation or marketing, distribution, sales, and more. And so the model that Coastline is using has been particularly intriguing to me to follow, as they are essentially a food hub for seafood producers. There's an interesting difference is that in the world of agriculture, food hubs have propped up as a way to provide middlemen services for farmers so that each farmer doesn't have to invest in their own truck and their own maybe POS, software systems and their own marketing. They can hire that out with one middleman who will do all of those services for them. Whereas in seafood, we're finding through Coastline's model is that fishermen are actually needing to reduce the number of middlemen. And so Coastline is now kind of taking multiple of these services under their roof to help prevent those, many, many markups that need to happen that will enable seafood to stay local. So Coastline's really helping to rewrite the script for New Hampshire's fishermen by providing the needed middlemen services all under one roof. They're significantly cutting down the supply chain length and decreasing the markups along the way. So without further ado, I would love to transition into a Q&A, a conversation with Denise so that we can learn more about what's going on in New Hampshire. I'm sure questions will pop up along the way. If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat or hold on to it, and we'll make sure that there's plenty of time towards the end where we can open up the discussion with everyone. So thank you so much, Denise, for joining us today. Welcome. I'm wondering if you want to kick us off with just an introduction and tell us a bit about your background in the seafood industry and how Coastline came to be.
Yeah, definitely super excited to be here today. Thank you. Um, my name is Denise. I was pretty much born into the fishing industry. My parents were fishermen. So, as soon as I could walk, I was on the boat next to them. Been on the water my entire life. I've gill netted, lobstered, clammed. My first job was actually in the seafood industry. I started packing whole monkfish out down in Chatham on the fish pier for a seafood company called Red's Best. From there, and that was my first summer job out of high school, so about 18 years old at that point. And then from there, I just stayed in the fishing industry. I went off to college, but when I came back, I was still working on the water every summer, over winter breaks, all that. After Red's Best, I went and worked for Chubby Fish. They're a bluefin processor and wholesaler. So I did bluefin tuna for about 3 years. And then after that, my mom took a position up in New Hampshire at the Yankee Fishermen's Co-op as general manager. And she called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come work for me?" So from there, I made my way up, moved to New Hampshire, was the warehouse manager, driving trucks, going through fish, all of that for her at the co-op. And just after a few years there were some management changes. And my mom and I looked at each other and we said, "Hey, you know what? We've been doing this for our entire lives. We've built connections with fishermen and wholesalers and dealers, and they followed me from Red's Best to Chubby Fish to the co-op. And you know what? Let's do something on our own here. Let's just dive in, and I'm sure these people will follow. They've been loyal, and from there, that's how Coastline started.
Awesome. It's so good to hear that background. I'm wondering if you want to kind of dive into Coastline's operation now and give us an idea of, how big your operation is, maybe how many fishermen you're working with, and if you want to maybe bring us through the supply chain of how seafood gets from fishing dock to loading dock through Coastline, that'd be great.
Definitely. So right now, we are still a pretty small operation. It's me, my mother Linda, and my wife Annabelle. So my mom, she does pretty much a lot of our wholesale and dealing with the fishermen direct. I do a lot of retail sales, dealing with our restaurants and our pop-up markets and our retails. Annabelle, she is kind of our behind the scenes, does all our marketing, and our online social media coordinating, all that stuff for us. My mom and I, we both drive the truck, so we pick up the boats and do all the delivering ourselves. We have two refrigerated box trucks, a 26-foot and 18-foot. We share a processing facility, so we do have a small warehouse that we share. And right now, I want to say we have probably by product from about 45 different fishermen and vendors. So that spans from, scallops, ground fish, bait, lobsters, just kind of anybody who sells us anything. We deal with small boats, hand line gear, a guy that has, a quota of 100 pounds of cod, 300 pounds of pollock, all the way up to, a dragger who can bring in 10, 20,000 pounds. So everywhere in between. Um, Basically, we do a lot of wholesale down in Boston. I send fish out anywhere from Portland, Maine customers all the way down to New Bedford, in Rhode Island. I've got customers in Canada. Right now, we're really trying to push a lot of local customers. So I'm trying to open up those local restaurants and fish markets around here to keep our local fish local instead of just, shipping it to other states and other countries and stuff. So obviously we do need those other big wholesalers to take it when we have a lot of fish being landed. But if we get enough small people to buy it around here, then it will really relieve that and help us not have to push those big lump sums down to Boston and to other countries and stuff. As far as our kind of fishing dock to loading dock, as you can see on the screen here, basically, a boat calls, they say, hey, I'm planning on going fishing this date, based on weather. They say, hey, I need, 5 vats of ice, this much to get us going. We need empty vats, totes, this, that. We set up a time with them. I bring it down, drop it off at the boat. Then basically I wait for a call. They could be out fishing for 1 day to 4 or 5 days. We wait for an email usually that says, hey, we're going to hit the dock at this time. We've got, 10,000 pounds of fish. This is what we need when we see you. From there, we meet them at the dock at that time. We offload them. So we take their vats full of fish, give them empty vats back and ice back on the boat. We load it onto our box truck. From there, either it will go to auction, or if we have sales lined up, we will bring it back, process it, sort through it, weigh it, ship it out to the customers that we already have, or we will process and fillet and get out to fillets to restaurants. And then anything that doesn't get sold either on the auction or right away, we ice heavy, keep it in inventory, and then work hard on just hitting the phones and trying to sell it from there.
That's awesome. So you're essentially, kind of housing a lot of that work internally. And have you found that many other businesses are kind of vertically integrating in that way?
So as far as like people who go to the dock, unload it and try and do the entire thing, not so much. A lot of people just unload it and then either try to just dump it all to, one big wholesaler, or put it all in the auction where somebody else deals with it, where at the auction, they'll, sort it out, weigh it, all that for the boat. And then the buyers will log on and bid for the fish, and then the auction will actually break up that fish, get it on a truck to where it goes. So for us, we're breaking down that fish, getting it on a pallet, then I'm then putting it on our truck, getting it to either transfer station or direct to that customer. So we kind of take it all in at once rather than breaking it down and having it go to, a different company or a trucking company or a transfer station or anywhere else.
Got it. I'd love to hear what problems in particular you feel like the seafood supply chain, that are in the seafood supply chain that Coastline is directly trying to overcome, and how is Coastline addressing those?
One big issue, like you touched on before, is just all this, Icelandic fish being imported in. You know, it's coming in at a lot lower price and a set price because they're landing, 100,000 pounds all at once and have that fixed cost and fixed price, and they put it in the freezer. Where, we're landing fish at, just thousands of pounds. And before the boat even leaves the dock, they've got to pay for that fish ahead of time. And they're out fishing, they don't know what they're going to catch. They come in, they don't know what they're going to get for their catch, but they're already in the hole with what they bought the fish for. Could be, they could, for instance, hake, they could buy it for $1.30 a pound before they've even caught it. Well, this year there was a lot of hake being caught and brought in, but nobody was buying it. So they already bought it for $1.30. They've got to pay for ice, fuel, you know, food, everything for the boat. So now they're probably into it, well over $2. Then that now hits the auction or hits the market here, and people only want to pay $1.60 for it. So now they're in the whole 40 cents for what they just went out and caught, and they have to catch it and they have to bring it in.
Mhm.
So
And
that is
to
like,
hire
it's
someone
a
to,
lot of people don't know.
mhm.
And it's hard for them because now they've already caught it, they brought it in, and they're, essentially in the red at the end of the day. And, these restaurants and, you know, retailers and all that, they are attracted to that Icelandic because the price is there. The price is going to stay that same price today, tomorrow, next week, next month. Whereas a market that fluctuates every single day on the auction is pollock could go today for $3, but tomorrow it could go for $1.50. So you never know. And restaurants, they're usually working off fixed costs anyways, so that's very attractive to them. They know what they're getting, it's already in the freezer. They don't have to worry about weather. If they put up a special and then all of a sudden, we get these big storms rolling through and no fishing boats went fishing and nothing landed, then what are they going to say? Oh, well, we don't have any fish for our special that we just advertised for the last, few months. So that's why so many people just rely on the Icelandic stuff because it's already here, it's already sitting in a freezer, and they already know the cost way ahead of time.
Yeah, thanks so much for spelling that out. I'm wondering, it might be worth just to take a moment. You mentioned, like, for example, hake was, the fishermen were already spending $1.30 on hake before they sold it. I think
Mhm.
people in the agriculture world, at least for me, I didn't necessarily understand that concept before. It is so different in seafood than it is in agriculture. Can you explain just like why is it that they've already spent a buck 30, a pound on hake? Is that the catch quotas?
Yeah, so that's the quotas that they have to buy and able, to go out and catch and
Okay.
bring in that fish and land it. So, other people have quotas, whether it's fishermen who have that quota and aren't fishing anymore and they just hold on to it, and then basically they can buy that quota from them and that fisherman just can sell it for whatever they want to. There's no like regulation that says, it has to be within this amount. Like there's nobody regulating that. They can basically say I want $1 a pound or I want $5 a pound. And if you can buy it or if you don't, too bad. You know, it's just kind of their judgment on it.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, that is, it's not like an expensive permit, and then once you have the permit, you're allowed to catch so much. It's like they are actively having to buy per pound what they are catching.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Um, and I'm so curious to hear what some of the biggest challenges you face in your day-to-day, specifically operating Coastline Seafood.
Um, Day to day, I would say, again, just trying to find these local markets, trying to convince people to realize that the local fish, the quality of it is so much better, and it is worth, paying that extra dollar 50 cents, whatever it is for it. It has a longer shelf life. Just the quality is there. Most of the stuff that we get is all day boat. It's not out at trip for weeks, 30 days at a time. It's not being frozen at sea. It's all fresh. So to call a customer and really say, hey, try this, it's great. And like, well, it just costs too much and I can get it over here. It's giving it to them, letting them try it, letting them make that decision themselves afterwards. I've given chefs just fish and saying, here, try do something with this. Even trying to diversify, like you said, like everyone knows cod, everyone knows haddock, but you don't really see a monkfish on, a menu no matter where you go. You see fish and chips with supposedly local caught haddock or pollock, but they don't realize that, pollock and a hake is similar to a haddock or a cod. You can pretty much do the same thing with it. Instead, they just kind of go with what they know and what's generally advertised. So
Gotcha. And on the flip side of that, what is it that keeps you motivated and passionate about this work? Maybe, if you want to tell us some of your favorite parts of this work.
I love being on the water. I love just meeting people, and especially growing up on, a boat with my family and stuff. It's a different group of people, it's a different crowd. I remember sitting on the docks with, old grumpy fishermen when I was 18 and I was getting ready to go off to college, and it was they all decided they were going to get milkshakes, and they were like, you know what, we're sending you off to college, we're going to get milkshakes, and they had beers behind their milkshakes and stuff, but I was enjoying a milkshake with them, and they all kind of got together and gave me like a little going away party, which was, awesome. Everyone came together, and just seeing like the community, like they're all there, they're all willing to help each other no matter what. Yeah, you might get into, you're fishing over here, I'm fishing over here, but at the end of the day, like if something happened, they're all there to have each other's backs. And just seeing that in the community, no matter what, is just awesome. And I really want to keep that going. Like the graying of the fleet, not many people are doing it. So it's something that's really passed on, and I've been in it my whole life, and I just want to keep it around.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely the word that came to mind when you were describing. Just it feels like such a deep sense of community, and even through the classes with Andrea at the Young Fishermen's Alliance, just hearing about things that we don't think about going about our daily lives, or even as farmers or as nonprofit advocates. When a boat breaks down out in the ocean, like you only have each other to radio and rely on. And so there is this real sense of needing to lean on each other for safety, for getting things done when things happen. And I think that just has brought such a sense of community for me too in the seafood industry. That yeah, you really all need each other to make the industry work.
Definitely.
And so kind of as a transition question, and then we'll open it up to the audience after, really trying to bring in this idea that, there's all these voices in this room listening in now, maybe educating themselves about some of the issues in the seafood industry, who are sitting in positions of maybe state agencies or nonprofits, where we are all food systems advocates. I'm wondering what you think is the best way for how this network of food system advocates can best support your business and your overall vision for the seafood sector in New Hampshire.
I would say just, educating yourself, when you're buying your local seafood, asking questions, where did it come from? Is it locally sourced? And really trying to go about buying that locally sourced seafood would be a huge help. You know, local restaurants, kind of pushing them to buy local and making those decisions there. I mean, I've really wanted something, but I've asked, say, oh, is this fish local? It's not. Okay, then I change my meal that I'm going to get at a restaurant. And I think when they see that people are actually shying away from that because it's not a local fish, then that kind of gives them incentive to change their menu and really, again, ask those questions and try and find more local fish. So I would say just educate yourself more. Try to, again, shop local. and try and also find those places that, like I said, are cutting out all those middlemen, rather than, you know, if you see a fisherman down the dock and you ask them for fish, I guarantee you they'll sell it to you direct, and you can't get any fresher than that.
Mhm.
So again, cut down the middlemen and know where your seafood's coming from, and really try and shop local.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much for that. And so, yeah, we want to start to open it up to audience questions. I just want to check in with Colleen. How we doing? We doing well?
Yeah, we got some great questions in the chat.
Great.
First couple questions from Amanda at the Boston Globe. Amanda had got some answers from Andrea in the chat, but I think I want to give Denise a chance to answer if she'd like. Amanda asks, when Katelyn mentioned that fishermen are getting paid low prices for fish, can you be more specific, really kind of what those prices are and what are they compared to? I think we did a little bit of that, but if there's anything more you want to say about that, Denise. And then additionally, what kinds of fish are people in New Hampshire eating versus what's kind of coming in?
Mhm.
Anything you want to share about those questions, Denise?
Just for one that sticks out to me on pricing this season, is monkfish has typically, in my time of being in the fishing industry, I haven't seen monkfish go for less than $2.50 back to the boat. This season, it has, the price dropped to the worst I've ever seen it. Monkfish was going for $1.20 a pound. So that is just, I couldn't, I was having a very hard time pushing it. Like I said, I couldn't even give it away for free at some points. Some fish, there was so much being landed because, again, with the price being so low and so much being out there, the boat has to make up that cost by catching a lot more. So the poundage side of it, and some fish was actually going bad because it wasn't getting moved in time, where then it now had to be used for bait. So that's like, that was huge. Like I've never seen that, and it was something that was alarming because normally your monkfish this time of year would be going for upwards of $4 a pound because they're just, there wasn't enough going, being caught, being landed. It was just high demands, and then the demand just dropped this year, and it was insane, to see that. So
Hmm. And then, yeah, I guess to Amanda's question, what do you think, this discrepancy that I talked about in the beginning, 90% of our seafood's being export, we're importing 90% to meet the demands of what people actually want to eat. Do you mind just reviewing the kinds of fish that we are eating as opposed to what is actually being landed?
so a lot of local fish that I think that we're eating and moving, it's easy to move, your haddock, pollock, people know about it, but they prefer a haddock, but they will take pollock. You see that in your fillet of fish at McDonald's and stuff like that. Lobster. Everyone kind of knows those like popular fish, swordfish, salmon. Those are like your popular, but they're not actually as local as you think. Salmon, being, a local seafood person, we sell so much salmon, and like it's like it's one of those things where it's like, great, the customers want it, I need to meet their needs, but it's not local, and it's not that I hate selling it, but it's one of those things like, buy something different, expand your palate. Don't just go for the salmon or the sword. That's not your local stuff. I can find you something different. If you're looking for, a steaky fish like a swordfish, halibut, that's great. It's a big, thick, meaty chunk. Those are being caught here all the time. If you're looking for something along the lines of a haddock, well, try pollock. It's different. It's abundant. It's a little bit cheaper. And we have all that here. Hake was landed huge this year. It's a white, flaky, soft fish. Use it in your fish chowders, your stews, all of that. That's awesome too. Monkfish. You can pretty much do anything with monkfish. They, call it poor man's lobster, but you can do anything. You can grill it, you can put it in the oven. It pretty much withstands, whatever you put on it. You can make it, you season it whatever way you want. It's actually really good, but a lot of people are just afraid of it, the name of it, what it looks like, not knowing how to cook it, or prepare it. I think that shies people away from fish too. Because if you prepare it, not so great one way, and they tend to just blame it on the seafood rather than the actual preparing, or how they cooked it or overcooked it or under seasoned. So
Great. Thank you. Got another question from Susan Olcott. Do you try to market fish as local whitefish instead of species specific to provide more stability for buyers?
No, I think that a lot of fish is like mislabeled, and that's one of the things I really try to fight, is mislabeled fish. Like a local whitefish, well, that could be, is it a haddock? Is it a hake? Is it a pollock? Is it a flounder? What is it? You know? And to educate the public, they don't know what they just ate. So there's like, oh, I went and got this local white fish. Well, now when they're going to the supermarket to buy it, it doesn't say whitefish in that case. You know, it says pollock, it says haddock, it says hake, it says flounder. I really want the customers to know what they're eating, where it came from, is it local to around here? So that way they can, again, be educated. And then when they're going to buy it, ask those questions as well and know what they want ahead of time.
That's a really great point. Yeah. I think there is a push for, you know, especially institutional buying, you know, it's like, well, can you do a whitefish? You know, can you just be assured that your fish tacos are going to be, yeah, a fish is going to be delivered that you can provide something like that. But I really like that point of, you know, part of the education piece really is like knowing what you're eating,
Mhm.
and knowing that they are all slightly different. Another question from Steve. Who are the fishermen buying quota from? Which I think this is a great question. Again, just educating us more ag focused folks. What is the entity that manages the regulations quotas?
So there's different sectors, and there's someone who runs that sector, and all the different boats are in that sector. So like the fishermen buy quota, and they buy permits. Well, not all those fishermen who have the quota and the permits are actively fishing. So the fishermen who aren't actively fishing have that quota that they are allowed to lease and sell out to the fishermen who are fishing, who maybe used up all their quota to keep fishing. And then now through that their sector, they're offered that you know, however many pounds of that type of species. And that's who they buy it from.
Gotcha. Andrew, I see your hand up. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, just a little bit more on that. Hey, Denise, thanks. So, folks, the way that people are able to catch fish in New England has dramatically changed. And what Denise is referring to is the catch share system. And that was implemented between 2010 and 2012. Before that, fishermen and women could go out and catch fish in a program called Days at Sea. So what happened is fishermen were looked at, their fishing history was looked at from 1996 to 2006, unbeknownst to them. And when the catch share system was implemented, each ground fish fisherman who fish for fish, we call it ground fish, was issued a permit with quota attached to it. So to me, that is naturalizing a public resource. This is just my personal opinion. The catch share system has been the demise of our ground fish industry here in northern New England, according to how our members feel at New England Fisheries, New England Young Fishermen's Alliance. Some other folks in New England have benefited from the catch share system. But what Denise is talking about, it's regulated by NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and under NOAA is the National Marine Fisheries Service. That's who regulates our fisheries. That's who hands out the permits, Steve, to answer your question. I so appreciate you asking. And then so what Denise is saying is when someone has to buy quota, that means they've run out of quota on their permit. So for instance, you get a permit and you have 10,000 pounds of cod, you have 20,000 pounds of pollock, you have 30,000 pounds of white hake, and you have, 15,000 pounds of flounder. If you fish all that fish out in your fishing year, which runs from May 1st to May 1st, you cannot leave the dock without owning the quota for the fish you are intended to catch and the bycatch of those fish that are going to appear in your net. So for instance, if you're targeting hake, all these bottom fish swim together, you are inevitably going to have cod bycatch and pollock bycatch, and maybe some flatfish, flounder bycatch as well. You cannot leave the dock unless you have the quota in hand purchased from either another fisherman within a sector, like how Denise was referring to, And that is all managed by National Marine Fisheries Service. So what Denise was referring to also is that we have some fishermen, very many actually, who have these ground fish permits and do not actively fish. So what they're doing as a retirement plan is buying and selling their quota. So this is a big stock market for fish. And as everyone could probably tell, it's definitely a hot spot with us. So it's really been it's put a lot of young fishermen out of business, and it's put a lot of old timers sitting on their couch leasing their quota because they can't go fishing for cod anymore. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I appreciate spending a couple minutes on that topic though, because it is so different from agriculture, and it's impacted fishing here in New England. And it's also, conceptually, I think there's a lot going on with it. So there's a lot for us to kind of grapple with and try to understand in what does it mean for fishermen, and how can we support them despite these regulations that are being detrimental to their business health. So more questions are coming in. We'll spend a few more minutes getting to what we can answer here. And I see a question from Karen. Does Coastline guarantee prices to fishermen or pass through what you're able to secure with a fixed markup?
No, I can't, guarantee a price. I can guarantee that I'm going to do my hardest to get them the best price for their fish, but I can't tell them exactly what that price is. Fish, it's a perishable product. You see this a lot with for instance, the tuna fish and the wicked tuna, and giving a price right there as, they lands. Well, I've, processed tuna and bought tuna for 3 years. Well, there's been times where I bought a tuna, it looked great, sent it down to a customer who then cut it open, and the fish on the inside had a tumor, was, there was issues with it, right? So if I bought that from the boat, already cut them their check, am I going to run back to them and say, hey, your fish actually wasn't good, can I have my money back? It doesn't work like that. I would go out of business. Everybody would go out of business if that was the case. Market price, right? It's changing day by day. That's why you go into a restaurant and you see on your scallops or your clams or your lobsters, MP, market price, because they don't know, it's literally changing daily.
Mm-hmm. So you're not only taking into account, your own overhead and the income you need to sustain your business, but also you're keeping a close eye on that market price and doing what you can to get the fishermen the best price.
And just, it's hard, but even just predicting with weather, a lot lands today, but I don't want to sell it all today because I'm looking down at the rest of the week and it's going to be, very windy and no one's going to fish. So I kind of want to keep that fish, because when people are going to look for it Thursday and Friday, there's going to be nothing around, and I know they're going to pay more money for it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
it's playing the game there. And it's having that knowledge of what's going on in different markets as well. If you have one auction that's going off later and you're looking at what kind of the market price in the city was today, and somebody wants to bid on your fish lower, you're like, no, because I know, you're not going to get it cheaper down in Boston. They're paying, $4 for it. So just kind of sticking to your guns and, instead of just dumping stuff, hustle harder, find different customers that are willing to pay for it. And that's kind of what we do. At the end of the day, it's more on my back and more legwork on our end, but it's what we're here to do. So I don't want to cut corners and just dump fish just to get rid of it. That's not going to keep the fishermen fishing. And if the fishermen aren't fishing, then essentially I have no business. So if I can keep prices high for them and make them enough money to keep leaving the dock, and I can make just enough money to keep my trucks running, then that's really what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a dynamic world that you live in. So much appreciation for all the things that you juggle. And I think maybe while we're on price point, maybe I'll pitch that this might be the last question that we're able to get to, although I really appreciate folks being so engaged and keeping our chat nice and busy. Is Amanda's question, What do you find is the strongest pitch for convincing people to buy locally? She says that sometimes the difference in price can be really stark. Some items at my local farmers market look amazing, but cost between $15 to $30 a pound, which may very well, be outside the realm of possibility for a lot of New England families who are struggling to make ends meet. So yeah, what is your secret sauce there?
What we've really tried to do is just, pitch the quality of it. The fish is being caught, getting on the boat, it's being killed and gilled and gutted and iced down within minutes, and being brought back to the dock within 24 and 48 hours. And the shelf life on that is so much longer. The taste on that is so much better. We're not adding any, chemicals and stuff to preserve the look of the fish or the life of the fish, that's happening in other places, and freezing it and all that. So I think it's better for you. And if you can taste the difference, I have a feeling that, once you have that fresh fish and you try it somewhere else and it's not fresh fish, you're going to taste that difference and you're going to be willing to pay a little bit more for it.
Mhm. Awesome.
I would
Thanks.
love to get to Nate's question. I think we have
I was
just a
just
couple
looking
minutes.
at that.
And it's a real good one, Nate. Thank you.
Sure. I haven't gotten time to read it yet, so this is just going live. Nate's curious if there are any particularly valuable financing tools or resources that you and others in the fishing community use, and for what? That's a great question.
Um, yeah, I mean, financing, and we need infrastructure. We need more infrastructure along the coast here for us to be able to use and utilize and offload. In Portsmouth, there used to be a fish co-op there where boats could unload, they could get ice, they could get fuel, they could have the auction and sell their fish right there. Now I got to kind of bring my truck there, put everything on a truck, and then go to my facility. There's just not enough local infrastructure in New Hampshire. Ice houses, cold storage, all that. You're looking down towards New Bedford for that, for Boston for that. So in order for us to kind of get more fish landed locally here and get more boats and people back fishing, we need to have a lot more infrastructure and have kind of one-stop shops for these fishermen along the coasts here. A lot of boats go to Gloucester because they have those one-stop shops there. A lot of boats will go to New Bedford because they're able to pull up to the dock, offload their catch, get their ice blown in, get their fuel, have a spot to dock their boat, and then go back out fishing. And we don't see that here. In New Bedford, they can pull right up to their, buyer's facility and unload right there. For us, I don't have a facility along the coast. There's not much room for it along the coast here. And so it just, makes it that much harder for us to transport ice for them, or have to take the fish and then come back again and give them ice. And, it just kind of makes their day longer, makes our day longer. So we definitely need some infrastructure and financing and kind of help from, whether it's the government and putting something out there for all of us to use as a community.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on. And just a great way to tie in this, networking community that we've been talking with today, is that, seafood needs investment and advocacy, and hopefully that's something that each and every one of us can find a role in. So I'll hand it over to Colleen.
Yeah. Thank you both so much, Denise and Katelyn. I learned a lot, and I just think we got a peer into the world of seafood that I think is really, again, a part of our culture here in New Hampshire, New England. I think that even just that is something to protect for sure. A couple last minute things for folks. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love if you take our Network Cafe evaluation. That's in the chat there. Two other reminders is that our next Network Cafe in January, right after the new year, is going to be the very exciting agricultural policy forum that we host every year. So we're kind of merging our Network Cafe and our Ag Policy Forum together. So please be there for that and invite folks who think would be interested. And our strategic plan public comment period is still open and thriving. So please get your thoughts and comments into those briefs. You'll see the link in the chat there. And we are going to close things up with 1 minute to go. Thank you again for being here. Thank you, Denise and Katelyn, and Andrea too for popping in. We love it you're here. And yeah, enjoy your Friday. Go eat some local fish.
Thank you all so much.
Take care, everyone.